Welcome to the TCM Challenge, a monthly movie review podcast where Matt and I challenge each other to watch some classic films. This month's movie is 1953's From Here to Eternity, and I'm Matt in Buffalo.
And I'm Matt in Arizona, and boy, do we have a doozy this month. Because, not only is this considered one of the great classic movies, but this is the first time that on this podcast where we're dealing with a Best Picture winner. I know that in some of our previous episodes we've done with, Best Acting Awards and the like, but I think this took home the Oscar for Best Picture in 1953.
It sure did, and it didn't really stop there. It cleaned up. I think off the top of my head, it was like 13 winners, something like that. But I do have at least some of the big ones. It's Best Motion Picture, Best Director, Best Supporting Actor for Frank Sinatra, Best Supporting Actress for Donna Reed, Best Cinematography for black and white cinematography. They broke it out back then. Best Screenplay, Best Film Editing, Best Sound. I mean, you can't do much
Yeah,
better than other than the lead actors, right?
Yeah, pretty much. And you're right. So I looked it up real quick. It was nominated for 13 and won 8. So almost all of them. My God.
And I wonder if for Best Actor they went with Montgomery Clift and Burt Lancaster both got nominations. So I wonder if it split the vote. Right? You hear
It
that's a
probably
thing,
did. Yeah.
right? So I mean, we already kind of hit on it, but we always do the level setting of just what else was out at that time. This was the big movie of 1953. It for the best picture, it won for best picture, but the other nominees were Julius Caesar, The Robe, which I actually wasn't familiar with. That was new to me when I did the research on this
The
biblical
Robe.
epic. Yep,
Yeah.
and
First,
Roman.
CinemaScope picture. Just trivia wise.
Uh, it's interesting you mention that because, well, to round out the nominees, Roman Holiday and Shane, I was familiar with everything except for The Robe. And then when
Right.
we go down to highest grossing pictures, The Robe was far and away the winner for highest gross in 1953. The second is This Is Cinerama, which is just a documentary air quotes showing off Cinerama. But third was From Here to
Hmm.
Eternity. So uh, cleaned up at the awards and in the box office. And then to round it out, Shane, How to Marry a Millionaire, Peter Pan, the,
Uh,
the famous animated one, and my boy Vincent
I
Price's
don't.
House of Wax to round out the top
It's
seven.
a. It was a good. God, it was a good year then. Side note: if it's my turn to pick, I don't care how many times I've seen it. We're watching How to Marry a Millionaire. If that ever comes up in my picks, I love that movie. But
Mhm.
anyway,
Well, should we get into the movie? Because I think there's some good character discussion. I would say is anticipated for this movie.
yeah, and not only good character discussion, but we've been dealing with. We've liked the movies we watched so far, and they've had some quality actors that were some unsung heroes. But this is the first movie really where we're dealing with truly a star-studded cast of who is who at the time.
Yeah, one of the things I kept seeing about that, which there's a layer to that I think I'm missing, because they make a big deal in a lot of the production elements of this, how much of the cast, with the exception of Burt Lancaster, are kind of cast against type. The thing is, I don't know what type they were necessarily to begin with to recognize, ooh, there's somebody completely different. But everybody more or less worked quite well in the role that they're in, showing that I guess all those decisions were right to cast them against type because I liked everybody in their roles. It worked quite well.
Yeah, I'm excited. Let's get into it.
All right, so we kind of clumsily walk through the plot, which I would argue there's not a ton of plot in this one. It's a lot of like character development and things that happen to characters, not so
It,
much plot, right?
it's not so much a plot as a snapshot of a period of time in the lives of these people
Right.
that
And
happens to
but
that happens to run up against a pretty significant historical event at the end.
right. By the way, you had no real history of this movie coming in, right?
I knew it from pop culture. Like I knew that this was the movie where Burt Lancaster and Deborah Carr made out on the beach because that's the still that's always used when people talk
That's it.
about this movie.
Yeah. I mean, and I remember watching this back in high school, which is now 20 years ago. And I don't remember anything of this. And I kind of went into it now, kind of looking at like how modern war movies are looked at. And I was thinking about, oh, is this going to be too much of a romanticizing of like that era? And no, it's not that. I couldn't be more happy that it wasn't that at all, right? It flirts with it in some ways, but it subverts it in a lot of other ways. So, well, we'll get into that. So, all right. Plot starts with Robert E. Lee Pruitt, or Prue, Montgomery Cliff, going to, by the way, bonus points again for shooting on location, to Army barracks in 1941, pre war 1941 Hawaii. He's been transferred to this new base for reasons. We'll get into that pretty quickly. But immediately upon him showing up on at this base, he has a quick, brief run in with Frank Sinatra, who will turn out to be his friend, Mangio. And just immediately, you can kind of see how Sinatra is like a very genial, respectable friend, right?
Right.
And not necessarily what you would expect for him. He is kind of working his acting chops in this, right?
You know what? I gotta say, this is not the first time I've seen Frank Sinatra in a movie, and I mean, I'm gonna say this about a lot of the characters in this movie, but I like their rapport right away, and I think Frank Sinatra, actually, for someone who's known to be a quote unquote singer rather than an actor, he does a really good job here. I like this character a lot,
He's damn good in the Manchurian Candidate too.
and he's good as a
So
detective. That's what I've
right,
also
so
seen him in.
I mean, we kind of maybe our generation, if they're even aware of him, it kind of thinks he's just like a caricature, right? And I think in this, you can see it's a little bit of a dated acting, but it's, he's showing some range and against that type of, the tough guy.
But he comes
He's
off as personable, which is something that I like about his character, because a lot of other characters are gonna, I mean, especially when we're talking about how Pruitt interacts with everyone else. A lot of other people are going to be extremely cold with him here at the beginning.
right. And I think because it's a believable friendship that he has with him, that will get into some of my character questions I would ask. Like, not not writing failures, just I want to know the character better than what was just captured on the screen, but we'll get into that. So Pruitt arrives to this base and he immediately meets up with oh shoot, what's his name, Holmes.
Holmes,
Is that
Captain
the
Holmes.
Captain Holmes? The Well, actually he runs into Burt Lancaster's character, I think, technically first, right?
Warden.
Warden. Yeah, who's
That's not,
basically.
it confused me at first because like that's not, no, that's not his title. That's actually his last name. His Milton Warden. He's the sergeant second in command.
Well, he is kind of the warden of all these army inmates too, so to speak. So I wonder if that was totally, a fluke or not. But Pruitt's character, you find he has basically three skills. He's a soldier. That's what he most identifies with. He's probably most proud of his bugling skills. And the part that he is trying to distance himself away from is he's quite a good, apparently a very good welterweight boxer. And the whole reason he left the previous command or army group he was in is because he was passed over by a less skilled bugler, so he has to leave. It's not a
Mm-hmm.
meritocracy. By the way, in the novel, which I didn't read, there's a ton of gay overt and subtext elements to it,
Mm-hmm.
which the army, who you needed permission to get this movie made, they wanted a lot of that removed. And that's one of the storylines, is it was a gay bugler was bumped over him due to a romantic, connection, and he
Right.
left because it wasn't meritocracy. We'll see more of that throughout the
And
story.
yeah, I know that the army stepped in and demanded a lot of changes, and from what I read, they still weren't happy with the final product.
Well, the thing, we'll get into it because it is subversive, right?
Yeah.
It's
Oh yeah.
it, what did make it to
Surprisingly
the
so.
screen. Yeah, what did make it to the screen is not exactly a glowing endorsement in the military, right? They took off the hard edges, but it's still all here, more or less, right? But it's the skill of his boxing that brought him to this group. This Holmes pulled some strings to get him there, because he is this sleazy military commander who thinks his way to self promotion is winning a boxing, basically divisional tournaments and all that kind of a thing.
And
So he's trying to recruit capable boxers to get his own career boost.
yeah, yeah, Holmes is one of the most despicable characters that we're going to meet in this one. He's just very slimy, very self-serving, and when it comes to actually running the base, like the day-to-day necessary work, could not give a fuck less.
Professionally and then personally, as we're going to see, right? So the whole kind of precipitating event to this story is there's something about Prue that he's not wanting to do boxing anymore, and he draws a hard line saying, I am not going to do boxing for you. The Holmes is quite pissed, sends him away, and basically says, well, you know,
Break him.
will break him. Somewhere along this line, he, said, it might be here, it might be later, I forget technically, but because he looks at it as the refusal to do this is just insubordination, let's court martial him. And then you start seeing where it's subtle to begin with, but you start seeing there's a little bit more of a depth to the Burt Lancaster character of Warden,
Yeah.
because when you first see him, he's a complete hard ass and you think he's going to be the jerk, right? Because he's immediately on top of somebody. But if you look at it, he's just on top of somebody doing their job.
Well, and you find out later, and the way I took it is he has to be because the actual captain doesn't give a damn. So like
Oh, yeah,
he's
there's no
running the
leadership.
base.
Right. So this is where there's a little bit of, you don't really pick up on it necessarily right away, but it's, well, let's not court martial him. Let's just kind of give him the treatment is what it
Yeah,
is.
haze him. Let's haze him.
Yeah, it's just endless hazing, right? So that's basically the beginning of the story, and there's a little bit of a gap between before we start seeing any real plot advancement, except pretty quickly after that, you do start seeing one of the love story elements come up. And if I'm going to have much of a fault of the movie, it's how this kind of comes about very rapidly. It's Burt Lancaster's Warden character seeing the wife of Holmes come onto the base. He's already off, kind of insinuated off philandering,
Oh yeah,
right?
not
I
even
mean,
insinuating. It's kind of it's stated outright later.
at different points, right? But it's just anytime he's not on the base, it's probably an assumption he's philandering.
Yeah.
So, pretty much right away, the Burt Lancaster character sees her. They have a little bit of like almost flirtatious, kind of nothing, but more so like shooting comments towards at Holmes' expense. But we go pretty damn quickly towards Burt Lang. I mean, do you mind if we just skip to the scene in the rain where Burt shows up to her the captain's
Well,
house,
well,
which is
because
her house.
doesn't that happen right after she and the captain have their conversation in her bedroom?
I mean, it's pretty quick. I mean, we're kind of jumping a little
Because
around,
I
I
think
suppose.
if I remember correctly, he sees her. They have that kind of meeting at the office, and then I think the next scene with her is when she and the captain are arguing at home. And if you already didn't think the captain was a bastard before, the way he treats his wife, played by Deborah Carr, kind of seals the deal for me.
And it's like a little bit of like it's I like the writing in this, by the way, because it's not the awful screenwriting where everything has to be overt. It really was a step into, well, these people have talked before. They don't have to repeat everything. So instead of him, for example, saying, I cheated on her, right? He just says it was a mistake. And you respect the audience to realize, like, well, she knows what he's talking about. He doesn't have to overtly say I slept with this woman, right? So it's just a nice relationship, or a nice writing showing that this relationship is obviously extremely rocky, to say the least,
Well,
right?
yeah, I mean, I noticed the dialogue too, especially how that scene ends with. I mean, it's clearly their bedroom, but I like the line she has when they're all done and she wants him gone is "Get out of my bedroom."
Yeah, I picked up on that. It's like, oh, not even separate beds. They're just in different rooms, right? So, but pretty quickly after that is then, I mean, just kind of for linearity watching
Right. No,
this storyline.
I just wanted to set it up that your point's well taken in that the Deborah Carr Burt Lancaster romance happens very quickly. But what I was trying to say is they do set up Deborah Carr's backstory in the sense that they show that her marriage is extremely unhappy, and there's something she hasn't said what it is yet. We're going to find that out later with the scene on the beach. Something happened between them that traumatized her.
And somewhere in here too, I don't know where again, but Warden is having a conversation with another a peer soldier right on the base, and he says something about the wife, insinuating, "Oh, she gets around," right, or overtly, like, and he even mentions, "I was one of them," right.
Hmm.
So I can't remember if that's before or after he goes to her during the
I
rainstorm,
think that's
but
before,
right,
but yeah.
because he goes there basically knowing the captain's not there. And at this point, it's like I was a little frustrated with this part of the story because he shows up and I'm like, ooh, kind of subtle kind of stuff because he's saying comments to like stoke distrust in the captain on the wife's part, right? It's not too overt. And I'm like, ooh, this is kind of interesting, long play. Let's see where this goes. And then he invites himself in for a drink. It's a slow fade, insinuating they connected to one degree or another right there, right? And I made a note. I'm like, did I pass out for a while? Did I miss a connecting scene? It seems like they have history just with this. And when they started to kiss,
I
really tender music started happening. It's like they almost jumped ahead of it a little fast. They did a lot of shorthand to get to this really
Yes,
quickly.
I don't know if I missed dialogue or something, but the way I read it was when they were making eyes at each other before when she was down looking for him at the base, right? I didn't think that was the first time that they saw each other. That's the way my theory was they had been eyeing each other for a while.
It's hard to say because they didn't have any real warm interaction, I would say. It's
Well,
like maybe they
no,
had a dozen versions of that interaction.
right. Well, that's the thing is I think that they were eyeing each other. I think that this is one of their first actual interactions. I mean, I mean, you can make, you can stare at each other and with mouths agape or have lustful thoughts, as shall we say, but never actually have a real conversation until much later.
But that's the thing. It's like I didn't get any impression from any of the interactions that they've had a meaningful conversation until he was in that kitchen a
Right. Neither
minute
did
and a half
I.
before making out, right?
Neither did
So
I.
that's
But I think that I don't think they had a meaningful interaction. I think that they had been crushing on each other for a while without ever interacting with each other.
that's probably fair, right? I mean, we see that presumably you would pick up on that during their first brush interaction,
Right.
right outside the base after he gives Prue his, you know, bunk stuff and all the equipment and sends him off, right? That's where she comes out. So it's just the thing is, it's like if I'm gonna have any light criticism of this movie, is that there are some storylines that I liked more and I was more invested in than others. And the movie's kind of long. I mean, it's a good 2 hours, and this part, because this kind of buildup was so underplayed, I kind of was least invested in it. And it's unfortunately it's the most iconic part. It's the part that they're on the beach, right? Which is a shame, but it's the part that it was like, they're two attractive people. I can see it, but it's like a little bit of that work. It's like they cut
I
out like a scene or something that I thought would have benefited it.
I think that the beach scene actually benefits them a lot. Now I agree with you. It's a lot more less developed than the other romance that we're going to get in this movie, but the beach scene happens not too long after, so we'll just skip to that. It's kind of funny that image is so iconic, and them actually lying in the sand kissing it happened lasts for all of 10 seconds before they
Oh,
actually
it
move on.
I
Um,
was writing a note and I looked up and I'm like, oh, I missed the most famous part. I just got to scrub back for like 10 seconds.
See,
Right.
I'm just so used to like. you've seen Airplane, right? So I thought
Of course.
I thought they had the conversation on top of each other like they do in Airplane, but no, it
Yeah.
doesn't. It's just that you're making out and then they get up and run and to have another conversation. But my point is that I think this scene ends up humanizing their relationship a lot more because they start opening up to each other. At least she does, because she reveals that part of the reason that she's on the outs with her husband is because they at one point she was pregnant with their child and she was having difficulties. I don't know what it was. It was implying that the way she described it, it sounds like she was on the verge of miscarrying and wanted her husband to come home to call the doctor and have her get looked at. But of course, he's drunk philandering somewhere, and so by the time he gets home, he passes out, and she ends up delivering a stillborn child. And not only delivering a stillborn child, but because he didn't get her the medical attention that she needed, she can't have any more children.
Had a hysterectomy, right?
Yeah.
By the way, the
So
book is it's gonorrhea. He gave her gonorrhea from philandering.
right.
But
Well, I
in
can see why that's not 53 movie.
1953 military STDs do not exist in the
No,
military, sir.
of
Right?
course not. And I know it's shorthand. I know it's kind of rushed in, but it lets me connect with Deborah Carr more, and it actually I think it humanizes Burt Lancaster a bit because you can actually see when she's telling that story compassion. It's the first time you actually feel like this character is actually much more compassionate than he led on at the beginning.
So this now makes me think, now that we're talking through it, maybe it was just a limitation of what you could tell about a woman in 1953. So we find out after the fact that she is hurt. She's trying to, you know, punish her husband, I would say, maybe in a way. So it's in, people are, she's got a reputation of sleeping around. Maybe this is, you can't really overtly say that. So you have to put it just with shorthand, lovey dovey,
Yeah.
shorthand storytelling of just they hook up on the first day she's by herself in the
Yeah.
house.
I wouldn't
But
be surprised.
it's limited, and you can't just, you can't have the woman just say, let's hook up and bang. You
Right.
have to couch it in the 1950s film. But then when you have this story, you can see she's opened up. This Burt Lancaster is not just another hookup guy to punish the husband.
And
There's
he's not
something more.
and he's not the uncaring hard ass that he appears to be at the beginning. You can actually see he has genuine compassion. He cares about what happened to Deborah Carr. You
Right.
know.
So maybe I'm talking myself a little bit more around in this, but it's again kind of the thing. It's like ultimately, I wish it, if this is what it was, it's a shame it was constrained by the storytelling, because not having a podcast to talk through it, it comes off to me initially as just, that was just speeding it through and just, forcing through to get the lovey-dovey story, right?
No,
So maybe
I
that's the
kind of
subversion
yeah,
again.
maybe it is. And you're right. I think that I mean, obviously this film is being made when there's still a moral code for movies. So,
Yep.
um, I don't know. I didn't necessarily have a problem with it, and I think that the scene between them on the beach where they open up to each other helped me go with their romance.
Oh, these are, to be clear, light criticisms of just like, let's talk
And
through it a
and
little
it
bit.
also
It's
helps that like I mean, not only do we have an A-list cast of actors, but I'll just go ahead and say it. In my opinion, it's exemplified here on the beach. It's exemplified here in other scenes between other people. The acting across the board is phenomenal. I don't think anyone gives a really bad performance.
No, it's like, if anything, a little bit dated, just in a couple styles here or there, but no, not that much. I mean, it's definitely good acting by any standard, but it's very good acting by 50s standards, I would kind of say.
Well, yeah, but I allow for that in watching these kind of
Oh
films.
yeah, absolutely. It's part of the charm, right?
Hmm.
So th- while we're on that character of the captain's wife, what, Karen, is her
Karen.
character? Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, before we move on, because it's probably a good break point, because that storyline connects with Prue's later on, but like, again, I think we've had pretty good luck of having pretty decent women characters in our movies that we've reviewed on here so far. Because with her, it's, yeah, maybe she's sleeping around a little bit, but she has her wants and needs as well. And I think she's a fully rounded character when we see
I
later
mean,
on.
sorry, go
But I
ahead.
don't think she, but I don't think she, I think she still gets upstaged by the other
Well, yes.
female lead in the movie.
Well, the other female lead, of course, Donna Reed, who we'll get to, I think has more screen time, or it feels like she has more screen time. Um, but but again, like you said, I mean, she just does a good job of making you root. Like I'm rooting for her to cheat on her husband. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, do we want to move over to Prue now? Because we've left the main star in the movie for a good
Well, that's what the
20
but again, but
minutes.
that's what this movie does. It's kind of like these vignettes in the days of the lives of these people. So yeah,
Right.
the first vignette is between um, Warden and Karen, and then we move back to Prue and him trying to deal with not only the hazing but trying to get away from it by
Right.
going
And
out.
yeah, so by the way, all the hazing officers or non-commissioned NCOs, non-commissioned officers, are all the boxers too.
Right.
So everybody in, you know, it has who can punish him has a vested interest in getting this ringer in. And this is, it's a little bit different. I mean, if we don't look at Captain Holmes, this movie has our narrative thread still from all of our movies of the toxic man
Hmm.
kind of storyline from all the TCM challenge movies. This is just a bit more towards the toxic, like alpha male kind of the gross army
Well,
mentality
it's
kind of stuff.
it's the alpha male army mentality. It's almost run like a frat.
Right.
This barracks.
It's like it's the jerk who is like, if I have power, I am going to exploit it.
Right.
Right. And you see that a bunch pretty much of anybody in authority in um Prue's, immediate command, with the exception of Burt Lancaster's character, right? They all exploit it
I mean,
when they
especially
can.
during when he's trying to do these basic drills, and I mean, at one point you just have like the drill sergeant out and out just trip him.
Oh yeah, complete singling out, bullying kind of nonsense is bad. So you do get a lot of this in the movie.
And again, setting up the relationship between the two. The only one who ever sticks up for him is Frank Sinatra, Maggio.
Yeah, who sticks up to him for any real way. He does get a number of like lesser acquaintances. You'd see them, right, singing occasionally, but yeah, the
Right.
only like meaningful friend that
Well,
you're ever really seeing is Sinatra.
I loved the little blues group that appeared throughout this movie.
Re-enlistment blues, the same song throughout the movie a few
But
times. Yeah,
it was catchy.
it was. I mean, it's something you don't mind showing
and
up
it
like two
and
or
it
three
and it
times throughout it.
and by the third or fourth time, Prue's joined in with his little mini bugle.
Yeah, just the mouthpiece. So you do see him really build up that friendship. They obviously had some pre-existing
Oh
friendship,
yeah,
so
they
you
were
don't
friends
see it.
before. Yeah.
Right. So you don't see the full groundwork, but you see him have his back. And I guess the next part maybe to bring up is they get their leave. They get into their, by the way, all the civilian clothes in this movie. Chef's kiss. I love it.
Well,
All
I
those
mean,
patterns.
we're in Hawaii. Let's not forget. So
Yeah, 1950s take on 1940s Hawaiian shirts, and then the shoulder pads to beat the band that Burt Lancaster puts on at one point. Oh, the shirt's the coat's just a giant rectangle. It's
oh yeah,
fantastic. I,
it's
I loved
great.
it.
I
So
mean,
anyhow,
it also helps when you have a bunch of pretty people to model all these clothes because I mean, I'll
it
just
don't hurt.
say it off the bat. This is one hell of an attractive cast, both men and women.
Yeah, I was kind of marveling at how everybody fills out their army uniform shirts. They're all triangular built. Goes down to this little tiny waist with big shoulders. Just like, how did everybody have that cut?
But speaking of things that you can't say in a '50s movie but are heavily implied, when they go on leave,
Brothel.
they go to a social club. It's a brothel, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
we have a mistress there who greets them and lets them into the club, and it's a
Oh,
bunch
that
of
woman's a madam like you wouldn't
yeah.
believe, but yeah, they're all
It's
waitresses. Yeah, get out of
it's
here.
basically a brothel. I mean, you have women who are quote unquote spending time with all the boys.
Oh, at one point, so this is the thing. It's like I get frustrated. Like, was this fooling anybody in the 50s? Like, they weren't that dumb, right? Let's give
No, they
credit to
weren't that
our
dumb, but
people.
Hollywood is so concerned with morality at this point that you just can't say it. It's evil words.
So the thing is, like, it's frustrating, but it does make it like a little bit of creativity because later on, when oh, oh man, I'm so terrible with names. What's her name? The prostitute is talking to Prue. She mentions the turn of phrase is she's two steps away from the sidewalk or
Yeah,
the street. So she's saying, I'm. If it wasn't for this place, I'd be a hooker on the street. It's just it's like you wouldn't get that turn of phrase and
right.
that nice bit of writing without that. So it's like you know, uh, necessity, breeds creativity kind of there, but
Well,
it's like,
she's even got her street name. So what who Matt is referring to is someone that Prue meets while at this club. It's Donna Reed, who I don't care if you're gay, straight, or what. It's one of the most beautiful women like who ever graced the screen, and just fantastic. I've seen her. You know, she had her own show at this point. She was in It's a Wonderful Life. Wonderful, wonderful actress, and actually, one of the few people I will argue manages to make crying look attractive. Um, I'm not kidding. Like when she's crying at the end, she's a beautiful crier. Same thing in It's a Wonderful Life. But she plays Alma, but she calls herself Lorene.
mhm.
And
And by the
Prue
way,
takes it.
she's
Go ahead.
also referred to as the princess by the madam, like suggesting she's not like the dirty prostitute or like she's not as like, well, whatever you want to intuit from, who's the more stuck up prostitute of the bunch.
Mhm.
So that was one other little nickname that stuck out for me right away.
But Prue meets her and takes an instant liking to her, to the point where he doesn't want her going off with the other men.
Yeah, there's a lot of that just, you know, juvenile kind of jealousy
Hmm.
around this. It's like, well, dude, open your eyes to what the situation is with her, right? Like, but in general, he's like very pouty at points with like
He's
the
pouty,
jealousy around that.
but at the same time, like I kind of understand him, and I never really like hate him for it because I don't consider it toxic. Part of me kind of considers it like he's been so mistreated by so everyone who he lives with, except for his one friend, that I'm not surprised he's seeking any kind of emotional connection, especially with someone as pretty as she is.
What would you guess is supposed to be his age in this?
20, maybe at the most 21.
It's like at some point it's mentioned he joined the army at 17
Right.
and like he got promoted to some degree, but they say because they say he's back to private, so he's definitely not old to any real degree,
No, I think
right?
he's
So
early
he's
20s. That's how I took it.
yeah. I mean, you can never really guess on an actor's age for the character that they're playing,
No, but
especially
again,
back
I
then.
mean, Montgomery Clift, really good looking dude, could
Right.
pull off early 20s.
Yeah. So it's like it's a lot of it's believable about that, but is immediately having issues with her connecting to any other guy, you know, that kind of a thing. And, later on you see she's giving maybe a little bit more disproportionate time to him to the displeasure of the madam,
Hmm.
right? You need to be making your rounds because I got to get my taste of your earnings, right? I mean,
Right.
that's what that's suggesting.
But again, we have another scene. I think it's the same scene too, or it's one that's immediately right after, where just as we had an intimate scene between Burt Lancaster and Deborah Carr, where people open up, we have another scene between Montgomery Clift and Donna Reed, where we find out just why he doesn't want to return to boxing, and it turns out that he and his friend from wherever he was stationed before, good friend, knew each other a long time, were boxing partners, and they were sparring at one point, and for whatever reason, he just landed the right kind of punch where he knocked him into a coma and cost the other guy his sight, and he
Hmm.
couldn't live with the guilt. And he played, and
Right.
when he does that scene, he manages to like not break down dramatically, but I was moved by his little monologue there of him telling what happened. Um, I
Of
thought it was
note, by the
great.
way, it is, and I thought it's one of those things of just um, very reality. It's again, you have to assume it's post-coital conversations where it's like, okay, those walls are down, and you start getting to quite a bit more like depth of conversation, right? It's like those conversations are very real of like you become a different person after that type of a connection with somebody. I'll
No, but
kind
just
of
the
leave it at
yeah,
that.
it was a great interaction. But I just got to say, whatever Montgomery Clift did with delivering that monologue and describing what happened, I got a little misty eyed, and I wasn't expecting that because it's like it's a kind of someone could call that a kind of a cliche background, but something about his delivery really worked for me. So I just wanted to note that.
I still think it's of all this, it still falls behind the one last backstory story that we'll get from somebody.
Sure.
That's still Alma's backstory to me because she is the true MVP of the movie.
Oh yeah,
When we get to that,
Donna Reed is a lot of the emotional core of this movie. Montgomery Clift and Donna Reed, I think, are a lot of the emotional core of this movie.
right?
But I really like the scene, and so it helps me connect with them two instantly. Like I ship them.
Oh yeah, I mean that's the Burt Lancaster one, and the wife. I'm like, okay, like I get it. It's kind of the iconic one, but this is the relationship that I was kind of really hoping for, right? So at this point, again, we've moved away from Sinatra. I think maybe we wanted to cover him because at this point is somewhere around in here is where he busts in on that conversation,
Mhm.
right? And this is one of those shorthand things. It's definitely in the novel, and it's in the movie. If you kind of are watching, Sinatra's character is gay. He
Yeah.
is, right? And he could have been with another girl, but he just, I just haven't found the right one or whatever. He made the excuse that she's drinking like a fish. Like that would have stopped that kind of a character back then if he was into that type of a, that gender, right?
Right.
It's he's the party dude. He's out there. He's loving to make those social interactions, but he jumps in on this. But around this is also where we get our Fatso character,
Yeah.
Ernie Borgnine.
Ernest Borgnine, who I did not know was in this movie, and then when I saw him in the credits, I got really excited because, I mean, of course, you and I know him from things like Escape from New York. Uh,
Which again, I honestly I don't know his full filmography, so I definitely know him as Ernie Borgnine.
mhm.
Escape from New York, the goofy guy, him playing a heavy,
No, he
throwing
used to be a
around
heavy.
slurs. I know. So it's like, I don't know if this is against type back then, but for me against type now, he's effective. He's a good heavy. He's effective at throwing around slurs like nobody's business. He's effective as like
And he's
a good bad guy.
and I mean, say what you will about how he looks later, but young young Ernest Borgnine, when he gets up and confronts Sinatra because Sinatra heckles him for because he doesn't like his piano playing. I'm
Terrible
er,
miming at the piano, by the way.
yeah, well,
That's like the worst part of the movie. But it's we'll give that a
but when
pass.
he gets up, I mean, young Ernest Borgnine is built like a brick shithouse. I mean, he's
Took the words
huge,
out of my mouth. Yeah, so they have like their first interaction, right? And
and
immediately just throwing out slurs.
we get dropped here that he is stationed at the stockade. That's where
Sergeant of the guard. So
sergeant of the guard.
basically, second in command of it.
Hmm.
And is this where he's like, people like you always end up in the stockade? or
Hmm.
it's some threat, right? Either here or at the next bar
Yeah,
fight,
no, basically, I'll be waiting for you. Yeah.
right? So you know, we have that, wetting your whistle towards that interaction. And then I don't know, should we just kind of their the adulterous relationship is really kind of proceeding. Here, going back to Burt Lancaster, we get some conversations around, well, how in the world can we make this work? It's bringing up divorce, which I don't think you see too much.
No,
And the way
it was still taboo back then for people to leave each other.
Right. So the way that we can make this work is get a divorce. We go back to the States and you apply, and because he is a not commissioned officer, become an officer. And then, this will be socially allowable for you to marry me.
Right, and that's
And
yeah. Let's clarify. That's the specific thing about you become an officer. That's her condition.
yes, right. And he kind of, well,
Is
you find
reluctant.
out he's reluctant, but he kind of like tacitly agrees to it, I'll kind of say. So that's that progression there. Um, and let's jump back to Alma's story because it's more or less in here you get her revelation on what her backstory is.
Yeah, because we'll just fill in the gaps. They become more friendly with each other to the point where Prue now goes to visit Alma, and I guess she's got a roommate too, at her
Right.
place.
And this is where we had his real jealousy, right? Because he's now getting it coming and going back at the base. They've ratcheted up his punishment. They aren't letting him go off base to, you know, see his prostitute girlfriend.
No,
So when he does get
yeah,
out after a month, she's got a different client, right?
yeah.
I mean, that's
Well,
just the
she's not
truth
gonna.
of it.
She's well. I mean, aside from the fact that what she does for a living, she's not gonna wait around for a month.
Right, because we get her backstory. So she eventually like, okay, I'm gonna get in trouble for this, but there is obviously a true connection between these two. You're right. You want to ship them. It's obvious. This is where she relays, for my part, she is the most well-rounded and interesting, strong character in the story with a really good background and just kind of everything around in it. So we find out she's from Oregon, and I'm guessing, if she overtly says it, but it's really implied, probably not that well to do. But she has a boyfriend who is the wealthiest, kid in her city or town or
Right.
whatever, right? And they break it off, and she takes this quite hard, and she wanted that, like, that financial security, that life of
Hmm.
what that boyfriend kind of offered.
Not having to
And
depend on somebody. Yeah.
right. So, well, that was like, it's interesting, right? Because
Yeah.
it's like that would have been dependent. But because she got that broken off, against her, it's not what she wanted, presumably, she heard of another girl who was hooking at military bases in Hawaii and how much money they made. So she was like, all right, I am now not going to be dependent on other people.
Yeah, it'll be on
Right.
my term. It's like, oh, I'm gonna be living on my terms, sort of thing, making my own money.
Right.
Uh,
So she wants to take command of her own life by what
right.
means she has, right? Which is very sympathetic. And so she goes to Hawaii, starts, you know, cocktail waitressing.
Mhm.
And her plan is, I'm going to make so much bank. I'm going to go back home and get a house for my mother. I'm going to provide, and I'm not going to be dependent on anybody, and I'm going to marry, but she still then frames it of, I'm going to marry a proper man, right?
Right.
It's like, so it's, I like that it's like seemingly contradictory to her own thing, but it's, I'm going to be independent. I'm going to get a whole home for my mother, but I'm also going to marry somebody and be proper, because it's, I think her thing is she has to marry somebody proper because she's not exactly proud of what she's doing. She still wants that legitimizing,
No, it's a means
right?
to an end. Yes.
Right.
She wants that legitimizing, but the thing that I like about her is that she's strong enough that she wants to do it in her own way on her own terms.
Right, and she's not liking it, but she's a rounded enough character that she's compartmentalizing. She's like, "Well, I don't like this, but I don't hate it." She says something to that effect, right?
Mhm.
And around in here is where Prue um, proposes to her, right? And she turns it down, saying that, basically it's you're not the proper person, you're a career army soldier, and that would be probably too much of a reminder to her of what she's not super enjoying here, and he does not represent that legitimate, kind of a thing.
Well,
It's
also
still
too,
in
I
her
mean,
mind slumming it.
this was also brought on by the fact that you know the her former boyfriend left her. And when you think about military service, I mean, I know the U.S. was not at war yet at this point, but back then, having a military relationship doesn't lend itself to permanence. You know what I mean?
Right. And I wonder if it's like maybe that's an element that should have been missing in this, is the sword hanging over everybody's head, because the audience watching it knows, you place the story in 1941 Hawaii, you know what's coming at the end of it. Maybe the characters should have known that too a little bit more, and that be a presence of like a sense of dread limiting like these decisions, because I don't think it's
But
really.
how could they know it in story though? I mean, the U.S. itself was caught off guard.
Well, by the sneak attack, but you can see the writing on the wall, right? I think it's like, you see the newspapers of,
Then
the
again,
Japanese
at some
advancing.
point, doesn't someone talk about the war and how war is inevitable or something like that?
So that's the thing. It is in there a little bit, but it's not necessarily at the forefront of a lot of characters' heads. So it's like, I think that, could have been a little bit in there as well. But
But even in peacetime, I mean,
oh,
having
yeah.
someone in the
Yeah, yeah.
military, that's a commitment, and commitment that probably doesn't always work out is probably most likely not to.
But I mean, it ties into basically the last line of the movie. It's the I don't think she can. She doesn't want to be connected to that what she perceives as, you know lower status
Yeah.
stuff, and it's just. I mean, this is good stuff. It's, who's at the lower end of the social rung as society looks at it than prostitutes. And it's just that very interesting, like how you can hold these very diverse thoughts in your head at the same time. It's a very real character, right? It's a multi-dimension female character. Is empowered. She is like not connecting everything to a guy, right? Neither one is
No.
necessarily, right? Yes, they have love lives and relationships, but they're
They
not
and they
all
have
their
wants
worth
and
around them.
right. They have wants and needs and expectations about what kind of relationships they want. But yeah, I mean, and you're right. I think there's a reason that either the director or the screenwriters or both realized, and there's a reason why Donna Reed closes out this movie. I think.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, you go out on your strongest weapon in the movie, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So, I think we need a plot point beat here where they're now the boys are all drinking at the bar, right? Out on leave. This is your next big interaction with Fatso.
Hmm.
Is you have Burt Lancaster in the back drinking with other senior non-coms, and in the foreground of the bar you have your Mangio and your Prue drinking. Mangio brings out a picture of his sister. Fatso comes in, sees it, makes some very lewd comment, maybe something at Mangio, maybe something at his sister. It's whispered into an ear, right?
Hmm.
Of, you don't know what it is, but it's enough for Mangio Sinatra to lose his mind and want to start fighting him, right? And I laughed out loud with him bonking Fatso in the back of the head with a stool. I kind of got a
Yeah.
kick out of that.
Yeah.
But Fatso pulls a knife. They're about to go, and this is where Lancaster's character just smashes a bottle. And he's like, "All right, you want to go? Let's get crazy, right?"
Well,
And
again, in addition to the character beat between Maggio and Fatso, we also see in the interim how they're starting to develop Lancaster more as a more compassionate uh, overseer of the people who are technically under his command and his rank, because he starts this. I think this is where he starts connecting with Prue too, and kind of realizes that he is responsible for contributing and suggesting that he get the manual labor and the hazing, and is starting to regret it. You start to see more of this more compassionate superior out of Lancaster.
what you have in him, I think, is he's one of those guys that has his code of ethics,
Right.
right? It's he expects a lot from people. You you're told there's a bunch of people here who are very good soldiers, and he's one of them, right? It's he has a very strong sense of ethics, what's
But
right and wrong by the
he's a
book, and he
part
has high
of,
expectations of people.
but he's fair.
Right. He's fair when he can, and he doesn't like incompetence, right?
Hmm.
And that's like the big thing that he hates Holmes about is just the incompetence. What at one point he says he would choke on his own spit if I wasn't there to,
To help him, yeah.
clear his throat out for him, right?
Well, to the point
So
where I mean, like he at one point he says, "I don't even give him shit to sign anymore. I just signed his name for him."
right, and it's like he sees this in Prue that he is a good soldier. He's taking everything. At no point in this until it becomes like too much and he doesn't even start the fight, right? Prue never complains. He takes it. He
No,
internalizes
he
it
never
all.
complains. The only time he ever fights back is when is the first time is what in that scene in the boxing room when the asshole sergeant has their first confrontation. Galavitz basically throws the blood bucket on the floor and tells him to clean it up.
Right, because that is a line between extra PT and doing stuff that's it's not doing dishes, it's people are throwing blood on him, right? And then the fist fight at the end. So I think that's all recognized by Warden and really appreciated. And he's like, it's the same thing. It's like he's recognizing that this guy has his own ethics, his own line, and I'm recognizing a lot of myself in there,
And so
and
there's
you do see that.
there's a respect growing between the two of them, or at least
Right.
from
So
Warden.
right. And along those lines, that character, he stops the stabbing fight, right, between Mangio and Fatso. And this is, I think, is like, punks like you always end up in the stockade is
Yeah,
the threat might have been in this
that's
scene, right?
that's this scene for sure. Yeah.
So pretty quickly after that, which is just like, head slap of all head slaps, they go on leave. Sinatra is putting on all the talcum powder the army has. He falls behind and he ends up going on guard duty when everybody else goes in the town.
Well,
You do get
they assign him to the extra shift because, again, like you said, head slap. He was the last one out the door, so ergo he was the only one there who could be ordered on duty.
right. So nothing nefarious there, right? But he goes AWOL, blows off guard duty, goes in the town, and starts to get a world class drunk on. And this is where Prue is with Alma, and basically it's, come on, dude, you're blocking your man here because he's like, I gotta go help Mangio, and she's like, go help him, right? And
Yeah,
he goes off. He immediately passes out on a park bench, gets kind of naked, and then gets into a fist fight with MPs. He's off to the stockade, right?
and to the tender,
And
loving care of Fatso.
right. So, and you just see, it's not, subtle, but it's not gratuitous. It's like you don't need to see him getting beat up all the time, right?
Oh,
It's
I mean,
just
once I knew that he was gonna be arrested and sent to the stockade, I mean, again, never seen this movie before, but I was just like, oh, he's so dead. Like
Right.
like I don't even think he's gonna make it. Like that was my prediction right away. Is like he's not even gonna make it out.
So during that time, plot point, I guess, to be, pick up is Prue is continually getting this brutal punishment, right? He
Well,
hears
especially from
about,
this Sergeant Galavitz.
right. And this is the line where the Galvitz just gets frustrated and starts the fist fight with Prue. Prue is pulling punches and then eventually just lets rip and knocks him out. But the plot point worth noting is the superior officer above Holmes comes out, sees
Well,
this disruption going on, and sees that Holmes is not stopping
well,
it.
yeah. Well, that's the big plot point is because Holmes gets
Yeah.
informed that there's this fist fight going on. He goes out to look at it, but he sees that it involves Prue essentially boxing. Like you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's a fist fight, but it's boxing. So rather than break it up, he just sits there and stands idly by and kind of smirks to himself. Like we finally got him. But it
Hmm.
just so happens that at the same time, his superior above him is also watching him stand there and do nothing,
Hmm.
basically break protocol.
Yeah. So I mean, the payoff for that comes down. Well, I mean, why not just kind of talk about it now?
It's the most satisfying part of the movie.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of the linear plot stuff doesn't necessarily make a difference, but so apparently behind the scenes is this is observed and there's an investigation. It's rapidly found that, oh yeah, you've been singling out and bullying or whatever the term would be at the time.
Well, also too,
Give me
I
your
forgot
resignation.
there was one more transgression too because when he eventually does step in and stop the fight or whatever, he's going to punish Prue until all the
Right,
other guys basically say, "Oh no, it was Galavitz who started the fight," and then he's like, "Well, we'll just forget that it happened then." So not
right,
only did he not stop the fight, he didn't enact discipline on those who were responsible.
right. So this sinks Holmes eventually. The investigation finds he's been, completely out of line with this.
And
He's asked to
it's
resign.
yeah, it's either court martial or be resigned.
Right. So he resigns, and then immediately you get shown to be a much more competent new commanding officer come in. Pretty much all the NCOs are all busted.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, Galavitz, that same tribunal busts him down to private. Uh,
Right.
and basically, when the new guy comes in, I just like he doesn't say this, of course, but it's like, yeah, this whole boxing shit is over.
Yeah, they're
We're not
taking
doing
out
it.
all the trophies. Yeah. Much to Warden's, grin right there. Right. So, all right. So the Holmes story is more or less tied off, I would say. Um, where do we go to next? Probably tie off. Well,
Well, let's talk about what happens with ends up happening with Maggio because that spurns the ending, the third act of this movie.
well, yes, but let me because what was now the what was there a precipitating event that made Burt Lancaster's character get his really good drunk on in the middle of the road? There's a lot of drinking and drunk times in this. It's hard to keep them straight. I
I
forget what that was because that's
well,
where Maggio comes up in that, but I can't remember.
I think part of it is him realizing that he's not happy trying to be pursuing the officer route.
Right, so it's like that's where I was wondering if we wanted to tie that off in the Holmes, but
Well,
it doesn't really
it
matter.
all ends up spurning each other off. So there's at some point where as the vignettes progress, Burt Lancaster is trying to abide by Karen's condition of becoming an officer, but it's eating him up inside because he really does not consider himself officer material. So he kind of is just
Well,
playing off.
he doesn't consider it because I think that is he sees all the sleep, and this is one of the indictments of the military in the movie
Yeah,
is the
sleazy.
leadership are sleazy. You have to violate you. He would have to violate his own hard lines of ethics
And so
to
I think
succeed in that.
that spurns him in a kind of not total depression, but depression enough where he's going to start drinking and um ends up running into Prue, right? Because they both end up
They
because
both
they both
have
end
like
up
real big
finding
trunks on.
Maggio. Yeah, 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 yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So they're in the
Because
middle of the
because
road
because yeah,
drinking.
because he's dealing with the officer thing, and Prue's dealing with the Donna Reed stuff of you're not a
Right.
proper man.
Right. So you're seeing that they're actually connecting at much deeper levels now, not just professional. I think they're seeing they're paired characters in a lot of ways, right? Kind of when we get into the wrap up stuff, it's like a lot of the paired, like where their ethics line up and all that kind of a thing. They're kindred spirits in a lot of ways,
Hmm.
right? In the military, but while they're there, they've already known that Mangio is getting it really bad in the stockade. When we see him go in, he does the Steve McQueen, no place can hold me type of thing.
Hmm.
When they're out, they find out that Mangio did in fact escape, and he stumbles quite quite bad shape. And this is one of those changes in the movie where it ultimately doesn't make that much of a difference. His equivalent character, which is a little bit of conflating of characters for the movie, but the equivalent in the book, Fatso does flat out beat him to death in the prison, right? In this, he it's told that Sinatra gets out, hides in a truck, falls out, hurts himself while falling out. So there's that plausible deniability that it wasn't an MP
Hmm.
beating a person to death. It's maybe the truck did it. But we all know dramatically who's to blame. Maggio, or not Maggio, Fatso, Ernie
Right.
Borgnine killed him,
Oh
right?
yeah. I mean, when you see him, those injuries were more than just falling off of a truck. I mean,
It's
that's
systematic beatings
systematic
for
trauma to the body, and he basically dies in Prue's arms.
months of beatings, right?
Yeah,
It was six
it's
months in the stockade,
it's
and
sad.
he's deep into it, right? So, and at this point, it's basically what Prue vows, I'm going to kill him, right? So pretty quickly after that, for that storyline, it's Prue is out looking for blood, right? And the knife that was disarmed from Fatso in that intermediate altercation, he picked that up and he's pocketed it. By the way, Burt Lancaster said, "Here, you keep it." Right? So, Warden put the weapon in his hand. He runs into out on the town. Prue and Fatso have an interaction, and Prue's like, "Hey, let's go talk in this alley. Let's settle some scores." And
Hmm.
Fatso's more than willing to do it. They get into a knife fight, and basically they both get cut up, but Fatso dies, and Prue gets a pretty bad gut wound, right?
Yeah.
Cut open pretty harshly.
I will say the one thing that was, and this is totally on me because I know too much about the movie making thing at the deals at the time, and it just makes me wish I knew less. But when that scene's resolved and Prue ends up ultimately the winner, me not having seen this movie before, I was like, oh no, that means that this movie's going to end with him dying because of the code. And I wish I didn't know that.
Um,
Like it like I figured it would probably end with Prue dying. Spoiler alert, but like because I know what I know, I mean, he killed a person, ergo by the code around this time he must die before the end of the movie.
it's interesting because it's like more or less the same thing happens in the book, and the book wasn't adhering to the code. So
No, I know that,
you're
and
right.
I know that this was probably part of the book, but just because, like, I spoiled myself. It has nothing to do with this movie. It just kind of bummed me out that I had that extra knowledge of movie making at the time.
Well, I think
But
it
I was still
works.
invested. I was still invested, very much
Yeah.
so.
Well, it's one of those things where it's like I think you came to the right conclusion at the end for maybe the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
It's funny, right? But so he's cut up pretty badly. He goes AWOL to go, because if he showed up, it's people know Fatso got cut up by a knife. If he were just roll into the base equally cut up but slightly less living or more
We'll
living,
know who
I
did it.
think people
Yeah.
would have put it together. So of course he goes and hides out with Alma and the girlfriend in their house, right? And this is what, December
Well, at
1st,
some point,
1941, something like
yeah,
that.
The thing that I love, yeah, is it's around December 1st, and so he's there trying to recover with Alma. Um, they end up getting closer as a result because we're about to come up to their climactic scene. But
Right. Before we get to that, by the way, when he's on AWOL for this time, Burt Lancaster's character is covering for him. He's
yeah,
reporting on
that's
his
that's how
presence.
you can tell that they're. That's how you can tell that they've evolved because he's covering for him, and he confides in during his next meeting with Deborah Karen, that like they're trying to talk about his difficulties in accepting her condition that he become an officer. Where at one point he sees someone walk by that he thinks is Prue and tries to go after him, and then when
Mhm.
he realizes it's not him, he sits back down and says, "I'm sorry, I've been distracted. There's this guy under my command that I care a lot about, and he's gone AWOL. So I'm trying to help him."
And he knows he killed Fatso,
Yeah,
right? He's just he. Who else could it be, right? He absolutely knows it's him. So, and this is right around this time. This is where he reveals to her that, Warden reveals to her that I had those promotion paperwork for myself, the applications for that on my desk. I never
I never
signed it.
sent them.
Yep. He made that decision to go, I'm not going to do
I
it.
can't
And
do
he
it.
knows what that's going to cost it. Right.
Yeah,
And they break up. Right. She drew that line, and which is good for her.
but
Right.
they
If
break
this
up in
was
a
important to her.
but they break up in a way that I kind of like, in the sense that I don't get that either of them resents each other. You know what I mean? I kind of like that they're walking away
It's
non-hatefully. I don't think she resents him that much. I know that she's hurt that he didn't follow through, but I mean,
Well, it's very adult,
yes. That's what I
right?
mean.
Where it's not it, it's hard to explain where it is, where it's like resent is a harsh word, but it's very
Well, what
complex
I'm
in
saying
how
is
I
it's
think
not one
they
of those
describe it.
dramatic things where she slaps him and says, "I never want to see you again," and runs off.
It's understated.
Right.
Right. Yeah. I'll agree on that. So that's all, you know, very interesting. It's like I said, very understated, and you kind of see, and again, the last scene, she's fairly comfortably turning the page,
Hmm.
and it wasn't all. It's like there's a lot of disappointment that it wasn't him, or that he wouldn't be with her for forever. But I don't think it's like, you know, well, that's the end of everything, right? She's
No,
perfectly capable of picking up the pieces still.
I don't even know if she considers it completely the end too, because we'll talk about it when we get to that final scene. But her dialogue, I think, is rather interesting. Both of their dialogue is interesting.
Well, I maybe got more distracted by, again, the Alma's dialogue, right? It's just because, again, she just stole the show. So the whole thing is they, never, they're still looking for the killer of Fatso. Two
And
and two's not being put together.
yeah, and at one point they're looking, or there's a scene that Warden has in the office, and I noticed the camera frames it just correctly so that you can see that the calendar on the wall says
So,
December 6th, 1941.
yeah, not exactly the most subtle bit of direction there. I did laugh at that a
Well, they
little
don't
bit.
like they don't do a close up on it, but it's perfectly in frame where you can read it. You know what I mean?
Right. So this is the thing where it's like, if you're watching this back then, certainly you should kind of know what's approaching. So next morning starts basically, you know,
Everybody's eating
Pr-
breakfast.
right, and this whole time you can tell Prue is quite depressed, right? Like the thing is, like, one of the things I want to talk about when we do kind of the wrap up again is, like, again, where's his motivations? Because yeah, he's cut up, but he's quite depressed beyond just like his physical state. But right around that is then, of course, everybody's eating breakfast. It's what, 8:51 a.m., something
Mhm.
like that, whatever the specific time is. They're there, and a bunch of American bombers with Japanese dots. I'm the World War II aviation nerd. They weren't real Japanese planes. There were a bunch of American Avengers painted like Japanese planes, but whatever. The Japanese attack Pearl Harbor, right? And aside from that snark, a lot of this is pretty impressive. There's a lot of just historical film strips, newsreels, interspersed. But the stuff of like the Japanese planes strafing the military barracks, that's 1950s special effects. It's a
Yeah, I
real
mean,
plane
and
flying
we get
around.
like strafing point of view shots from the airplane of them shooting into the barracks. It's pretty cool.
You're hard pressed to call this a war movie, but the little bit they give you is pretty cool,
Yeah.
right? But you get to see like, oh, somebody pissed off Bert. He gets a goddamn machine gun. He tells everybody to go to their rooms. I'm
I
going to
mean,
the roof.
well, no, I mean, again, this is where we've built this character up to where his big thing is not only his sense of ethics, but he exudes competency. So while
Right.
everyone's trying to run around, avoid getting shot, he pulls everyone together, gives everybody orders, and sets the situation straight. Has everyone report to stations. I like seeing him in command.
Right. And then the badass part is like, everybody go to your rooms, wait for it, get your guns ready. I'm going to get my asbestos glove and I'm going to go up and hold a machine gun by its barrel and shoot down some
Well, that's the
goddamn
thing.
planes.
Again, a thing that I like about him. He won't send people into danger that he won't face himself.
Right. I mean, I'm saying it kind of flippantly,
Yeah.
but it is like it's the heroic kind of thing. He's protecting everybody around him. Everything there seemed like, okay, yeah, this seems like the right plan. And then he just goes up and you get a little bit of badassery in the movie, right? You don't need too much. That's not this what this movie is, but you get just enough of Burt Lancaster being pretty
Well, and
badass.
again, the badassery, like I said, the reason it fits in this movie, even though it's not that kind of movie, is because it fits in with who we've seen Burt Lancaster as a character to be up to this point.
Right. So, Pearl Harbor happens. It's 10-minute sequence, good stuff. But you cut back to now, later in that evening as things have kind of settled down. The Alma and the roommate are coming back. It's neat. It's snapped into war mode. It's blackouts. The windows are covered, right?
Well,
You
and
get the
what's really
very crazy 1940s radio guy,
well, yeah, that's the other thing too. Is it made me kind of think, and I know this is a weird thing to think of in the middle of all this drama, but it's just like the fact that they're still broadcasting, an invasion is still possible. We really don't know all the information. It puts me back into that mindset of what it must have been like to be living through it in the moment. It's like, yeah, we were attacked, but we don't know if it's over yet.
right?
It kind of puts you in that 9/11 mindset because that's the only thing that frame of reference that I could think of.
You just don't know what you're waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Right.
Right. And it leads into just from practical storytelling. They're expecting Japanese saboteurs or, a full out invasion to just show up on the beach. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So this is now where Prue is like his sense of duty or whatever. He thinks he now needs to hold his gut together,
Well, not
get
only
his
sense of
clothes on, and go.
not only sense of
Right.
duty, I get the feeling that part of the reason he's so depressed is because yes, he did avenge his friend, but in doing so violated his own code of ethics. Because I mean, he got upset at the notion that he blinded another guy, let alone he's
Right.
killed another one in cold blood. So I not only think that it's his sense of ethics kicking in, I also think he thinks of it as his sense of atonement, a chance at atonement.
Yeah, I mean, talking through this helps a lot, right? Because that was going to be one of my things here. Is because, well, I'll start talking about now because this is his big decision of the movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's because he's like, I gotta go, and this is where Alma really starts like, what has the army ever done for you? Why are you going to do this? And it's like, in my mind, I'm sympathetic to her point
I am
because
sympathetic to her point, very much so.
because because what you see is the relationship with Warden is professional respect. I would never call that friendship per se,
It was
right?
bordering. It was getting there.
It would have, okay, there you go. It would have been there in time, I bet, right? The one true friendship, and it's a really good one, is Maggio, right? But everything around that, there is that one great scene where he talks about you could tell he was so goddamn proud of it, of playing taps at Arlington for the president. And that's the mouthpiece that he has.
Hmm.
So that's one of the only times where I can see like there is his pride. He's this musician in the army, and they talk about like, yeah, he came in when his parents died. He joined when he was 17. I could see that it gave him structure, but I'm conflicted by also look what it's taken away from him. It's taken away his the only friend we know, right? It's taken away his ability to play the bugle. We don't see it at all other than for Maggio's death, right? And him playing bluesy with the guys. But he had this career ahead of him as first bugler. He got that taken away and then probably to a degree self-sabotaged it. Right. He didn't have
Hmm.
to go, well, F it, I'm leaving if he got second chair or however bugle corps works. Right.
Right.
So it's like, and then just like they endlessly shit on him. So I get like he has the army gave him some purpose, but I still struggle with this decision at the end because this is like I'm leaving and she's asking what has the army ever done for you, and I'm like she's right, what has it done? And she says I'll marry you. I mean, is that like a pity thing? Okay, like, but take it, dude. That kind of a thing. So it's like I still struggle with him, like why he had to do this. Where does he really think he owes it to the military? To your point, it might be, now that we talk through it, that owing a debt, right? It's the I've never balanced the books on blinding a guy.
Right. Blinding a guy and then, even though it was for revenge, murdering someone in cold blood. I think what from what we've seen in the movie, his sense of duty, his sense of ethics, his sense of just basic what's right and what's wrong. I think that would I believe that would compel him to go back. I bought it. No, but
Right.
again, I also see Donna Reed's point because yeah, it's taken a lot from him, and I feel bad for both of them. Again, this is where my comment earlier. Donna Reed's a beautiful crier.
Yeah, I mean, I this is where it's like I sympathize with her because if you did the whole let's look at this coldly and analytically, let's look at the balance of what the army has given you and what it's taken away from you. I would
You don't owe it
say go
anything.
no, you don't, right? And it's your one genuine friendship is gone, right? And it's the army that murdered him, right? I get that the movie is not allowed to say that, but that's what
Oh,
this
it's
is.
true.
It's the horrible culture, right?
Well, not just the
So,
horrible culture, but like the lack of oversight and the lack of leadership that allowed someone like Fatso to stay in the position that he was in, even though there's no way that Maggio was the first person that he tortured in that stockade. There's no way.
oh, and it's Guantanamo Bay,
So
right? Or yeah,
they just turned a blind eye. So no, I mean,
or Abu Ghraib prison,
yeah, Abu
right?
Ghraib, yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So and then like so cutting ahead to facilitate this conversation, it's horrible day for night. Whatever it is, what it is,
Yeah,
right?
I got confused.
This,
I thought it is a horrible day for night because I got confused. I was like, "Is this supposed to be at night?"
oh, that first time Warden meets what's her name on the beach, I'm like, is this supposed to be noon or midnight? I
Right.
don't know. Right. But whatever. But so he's out there trying to run through centuries. Basically, you're told he's a hardhead. He refuses to stop and he's bleeding out. Right. They were right. He reopened his wounds and he's
Mhm.
shot to death and killed. Spoiler alert, he dies. So trying to get back in there. So it's like, it's such interesting, like, commentary of like, you're is he I'm loath to quote Trump and all that, but is he the sucker? Because the movie and the book is these people, Warden and Prue, they have this crazy sense of loyalty to the army. But and definitely in Prue's place, it's like how incredibly misplaced is that? And look at your reward for putting your trust in this military. You get killed
Right.
meaninglessly at the end, right? And
And
you don't even get your glorious Klingon death.
I'm so amazed. I'll just pause. I'm sorry to interrupt your train of thought. I'm so amazed that this was in a movie in 1953 at a time when, it's taboo now to criticize the military still. But although
Oh,
there's
you
been
can't. Yeah.
you can't, but there's been more criticism through. But back then, I mean, even though this is after uh, World War II, this is still the time of buying war bonds and doing whatever it can. You're only a true patriot if you support our forces. So I'm surprised that this movie ends up having this commentary in 1953. It's amazing to me.
I I mean, they tried to file them down, but the movie still does have
No,
teeth,
it
right?
I mean, they filed it down, but I mean, obviously, you and I can still pick it up.
Yeah, and like let's extrapolate a little bit. Warden being the leader of men, he's going to die in the war, right?
Hmm.
He might get that glorious, hero death, but he's going to die for this too, probably, right?
Hmm.
If he's leading from the front, he's dead. And it's like you get these two characters that had their outs of happiness, but they felt such, you know,
Well,
um,
that's the thing. The war.
indebtment to it.
If Prue hadn't died there, uh, the war would have killed both of them. I think
I think that's probably fair, right? Because they're meant to be like that character that just
because of their sense of duty, they would have fought till the end, and a lot of people like that didn't make it.
which this is this. I think the movie and the book are probably suggesting that they're were they the suckers, right? Like, should they have put that kind of faith into the military? Right? When you look at everything around it, it's
Yeah,
incompetent people ahead, it's systematic brutality, it's um,
but I guess it's
beating
up.
of gay people
But I
if you
guess
go
it's
through the
but I
book,
guess it's up to your interpretation of suckers because yeah, you can definitely classify them that as that, and the commentary is there, but in a way, it makes you admire them in the sense that it, their sense of character, their personal sense of character, where
oh yeah, oh yeah,
they can be treated like dirt, but ultimately they're gonna live up to their loyalties and be heroic in that sense, which is part of the reason I think Donna Reed could sense that in Prue too, which is why I think, along with her own needs and to keep up with her goals in life, why she ends up embellishing the circumstances of his death at the end of the movie.
well, let's get to that because of all the little tricks this movie has, it still has a little bit of a graduate type ending of like, oh, you're gonna leave us on a weird bit at the end, that's cool.
Well,
But
again,
so
this is where the dialogue comes in, and I said it's very interesting how what dialogue Donna Reed has and what dialogue Deborah Carr has, because you talked about how we Deborah Carr. It seems like she accepted that it was over. She was never going to see Mert Lancaster again. But it's interesting that she has the line about throwing the lays over the side of the ship, and if they flow back into the shore, that means you'll come back again. She doesn't necessarily close off that door. Donna Reed's follow up line says, "I'm not coming back. I don't care what And the implication is, I don't care what the lay happens to the lay." So
right.
it's just that little subtle bit of dialogue that makes me think that Deborah Carr, not necessarily over. Donna Reed is leaving for good.
Oh yeah, and by the way, nice little bit where Warden is summoned to the body
Oh
of
yes,
Prue, basically in a sand trap in a golf course. It looks like
yeah.
almost if it wasn't exactly that, and basically is like he was the best soldier, just hard headed, and then he's just like, "What is this? The first body you've seen? Let's get back on." He just compartmentalizes and moves on. He slaps into just, "I'm going to be great soldier mode, and send me to the first island to die on." Right?
Hmm.
It's basically where we're left with him is just snap into that. And then we get the final scene, which you said is the Alma and Karen on the ocean liner heading back to the States. and the we get the lay part, and then the part that I really loved is it's hard to kind of know where the real motivation of this is, but I love that this movie is left on that little bit of ambiguity for her character as well. You get the Karen one is definitely, yeah, she, that ambiguity of you don't know where it's going to go. Alma is, yeah, I'm not coming back. But when she starts talking to Karen, she starts talking about, I'm not coming back. My fiance died on December 7th. Karen goes, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And Alma goes, "Yeah, he was a bomber pilot taxiing his plane on the apron tarmac, and the Japanese hit it. Did you see it in the papers? He was awarded a
One of the
Silver
Silver Star.
Star. They sent it to his mother, but they want me to have it." She's lying through her teeth. Like, we know that this didn't happen. And you're like, for a second there, you're like, wait, did she have another like guy on the side who did do that? And it's like you're confused, and she goes, "Oh, that's very fine of her." And he goes, "Oh yeah, the Southern people are so very fine. He was named after a
A
Southern
general.
general, Robert E. Lee Pruitt." And you're like, "What? Oh." And then the cool thing is, like, Karen recognizes it,
Well,
and she kn-
because Burt Lancaster told her his name when he was mentioning the friend who was in trouble.
right. So it's like she knows that this is bullshit, doesn't call it out, but you're left with the ambiguity of, why is she,
Embellishing.
well well, why she's going to go back and maintain, well, I'm going back to my plan, right? And this plays into the plan, but you're like, is she believing this now? Is this the lie that she's going to continue to tell herself, and eventually she just believes it? Or is it just overtly a lie? And it's just like, it's such like a part that I had no memory of, that it ends on just that crazy kind of
I
ambiguity
know
at the end of just like,
and that's why I
that
wonder,
is
like,
such a real character.
the part of me that shipped those two makes me want to believe that she did this, yes, to maintain her goals in life, but also to give his death meaning, because I think he would have wanted his sense of duty, his sense of loyalty. She wanted to give his death meaning, um, but you don't know, and that's the beautiful thing about it.
Because I don't think she would connect it in her head as a
No,
real
but
person that he is dying because of a blinded guy. Right. It's like she's trying to figure out why he would do that, knowing, because I think she did say, "You're definitely going to die if you go out there."
right, but at
And
the
he
same
still
time
did.
too, I mean, we saw her kind of come around to him. So again, the audience member in me wants to believe that she's not just a cold, selfish bitch who would just make up the story for her own protection, But who knows?
Well, she was a person who had a plan, and it wasn't all connected to him. You know, her whole self worth isn't to him. So she's going to go back. She's going to buy her house for her mother, and she's going to build this story, and then, you know, go from there.
But obviously
It's
she.
weird.
But obviously, if that's true, then obviously though he meant enough to her where she could just pretend like, well, that relationship never happened. I have my money. I'm going back to buy my house. She specifically chooses to alter her story to include him in it.
Right. So that's where it's like, it's a little bit more respectable than the version that, it's enough that she wants to remember him, but not for the full context that she's probably still a bit ashamed about. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just that, respect him, but I'm not respecting myself kind of a thing. Something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. Whatever it is, it's like, you don't have to come up with the answer. It's that right level of like, well, it makes you think a little bit afterwards, right? It's
Uh,
anticipating a
well,
podcast
and yeah, it
50
spurns off
years, 70 years
spurns
later.
off the conversations like these that we would have, 58 years later about a
Right. So
podcast.
with that, I would say we're pretty much at the end. We talked it. This might be destined for our longest podcast yet. I'm not sure, but I think we do want to kind of wrap it up. So I'll Matt, you go ahead on this one. You picked it. So I don't know. Final thoughts, ratings. I'll ask the
Well,
dumbest question. Do you think it stands the test of time?
well, I mean, this is something that I've. This is a movie I mentioned when I picked it last month. I've always been meaning to see it. It's in every classic list, and I hate to sound cliche, but it didn't disappoint. I really loved this movie. I loved the character work. I loved the acting, the subtle commentary of the military at the time, and just different social issues. Yeah, I think it holds up great. I mean, again, allowing for the 50s acting and direction and a little bit of technicality and stuff. I really enjoyed this movie. I'm so glad I picked it.
So I agree. Like the thing where I said it's like it's a light criticism. I don't know how you fix it because all the stories individually are good and you can see there's a lot of meat to it. I just wish maybe like I said, I don't know how you fix it by not making it 3 hours. People have tried to make these into like different series. Like I could see this working as a modern Netflix.
Miniseries.
Yeah, miniseries, like a limited series run of, yeah, you can get 7 hours out of this.
You probably
Like
could,
I
yeah,
think, right? Right. So maybe that's the solution
or at
because it's
least
like,
if not seven, like five episodes.
right. I mean, there's like something in between where it's like, I liked a lot of this. Maybe that, again, just like flesh it out with maybe a little bit more modern storytelling
Well, and
around
well, and
like
now
Helen.
if it was modern too, we could add some of the stuff from the book that was cut out at the
Right.
Army's insistence from before.
So, but like it's the good problem because there's enough content and stuff in here. Look at what we did. You can break it apart and talk. I wish it was just maybe a little bit more smooth out in there. But that said, big picture, what they're trying to do, the subversive. I'm talking through it and watching it. I am quite shocked that this is made right because it is an indictment of the military. It's crazy they got the military's cooperation to make it right. It is not a glowing part of the military, which again, I don't think the military is awful. I don't also think
No,
they're all anointed gods and flawless.
well, that's
Like
what I was gonna
everything, the
say.
truth is in between.
There's no way that this kind of corruption doesn't exist. It doesn't have to be to this level, but nobody's perfect, and certainly no organization is perfect.
Right. And this is so much more critical to the military than you'll ever see now. Right. Just ever see right now. And it's just good on them for having a message and a story in which, for right now, you know, 9 out of 10 people, if you go to them on the street, well, 9 out of 10 who even know what this movie is, right? Just because people
It's
don't
old.
appreciate older film. Yeah. It's like, oh, that's just the romance movie.
Well,
Well,
again,
not really at all.
yeah, no, not at all. I mean, romance
Right.
is a big part of this thing, but like I said, the scene that everyone associates with this movie, the iconic scene, the only thing I knew coming into it is only about 10 seconds long in the actual film.
And it's followed up by a miscarriage story
Yeah,
or a stillbirth story, right? And then being sterile. Like it's it's not what people think it is, I bet, if you haven't seen it in a long time or, haven't seen it at all and you're only going by the IMDb's top whatever number of movies, top romantic movies. It's not that. It's a super interesting movie. Definitely worth watching. Definitely stands the test of time. All right. Should we tie that one off?
we'll tie that one off and say as much as I enjoyed the classiness and the rich, deep storytelling, I'm not looking forward to next month, but I can already tell by our selection that next month we're not going to be talking about. I have a feeling we're not going to be talking about deep, rich character and subtle commentary.
No, no. So, to say the least, the Turner Classic movies that will be shown in October are a little bit different, and there's a lot of crap, and we're the random number generator. I think was a very fair selection of those. So it will be my pick this time. But the 5 movies that came up in the random number generator for October are first 1955's Cast a Dark Shadow. A wife killer marries an innocent barmaid and plots her death.
Which, believe it or not, it sounds kind of morbid and stuff, but that's probably the classiest description that we're going to get out of these five movies.
Absolutely. 1943's I Walked with a Zombie. A
See what I
nurse
mean?
in the yeah, and this is old school zombie, by the way. This is voodoo. A nurse in the Caribbean resorts to voodoo to cure her patient, even though she's in love with the woman's husband. Uh, 1941, Footsteps in the Dark. An aspiring mystery writer stumbles into a real murder, which, by the way, is the longest movie that we could pick at topping out at 96 minutes.
And I take it back. That could pass for a real movie.
Right. By the way, I did pick up a bunch of other ones that are just not available anywhere, right?
Right.
Even more obscure horror stuff, right? So these are ones that are reasonably watchable and consumable. Next is 1958's The Robot versus the Aztec Mummy. A mad scientist creates a murderous robot to steal an ancient Aztec treasure. By the way, from the website that I do this, they always have the director, the runtime, the genre, and the actors. I giggled in this one. Actors, it just has null. You know,
The runtime is a lean 64 minutes.
efficient 64 minutes. And then finally, 1964, Spider Baby. Greedy relatives try to repossess the decaying mansion of an inbred Southern family.
Doesn't sound too classy, but then again, it has Lon Chaney Jr. in it.
That's right. Um, Also, a cool 80 minutes. So, my only lament is I could only pick one movie
I
officially
know,
this
I
month.
know.
So,
When you send me, normally we like to predict what we're gonna pick. I have not a goddamn clue between these five. I just know if I had to, if I had an inkling, I'd say we're gonna watch one. One of the three that sound like outright crap, just schlocky
oh,
crap.
you're certainly right, Matt. I'm going to say let's punch our ticket to Stupid City. We're going to watch The Robot versus the Aztec Mummy.
I
I'll
can't
send
wait.
you the I'll send you the YouTube link for the whole movie.
I bet.
Free, it's just up there. And the bit of trivia here is I've seen this movie before and
Oh, you're
so
kidding.
no, I am not. We've talked,
Was it a
coming up
Mystery
well
Science
over
Theater 3000 movie?
hell yeah it was.
Oh, I wonder if I
So
could find the episode then.
yeah, that's also on YouTube, so yes, you can.
Okay.
Uh, I'll probably watch it twice in that way. By the way, it's the third movie in a series. I'm worried if we're going to know all the continuity. I don't know. I'm a
I
little
have a feeling we'll be just fine.
right. I might watch myself some Spider Baby as well, but
I
the we talked for well over an hour and a half on this. From here to eternity. Are we going to get a good 20 minutes out of the robot and the Aztec mummy? I don't know. I guess we're just going to have to see,
I
right?
think what, between the two of our sense of humor and the fact that you'll watch 20 different versions of this film, I think we'll fill out our Halloween episode quite nicely.
That's right. And I hope we set that bar for all coming up Halloween episodes, right? So,
I mean, God, there with the selection this year, if we end up going on with this, and we could, there's nowhere to go but up from
right.
these choices.
I mean, we just had too many good movies for too long.
I know.
We got to dip into the
That's the
toilet
other
for a
reason.
while.
That's the other reason. I mean, because I was like, not only do I know your sense of humor and your sense of style, but I know you and the fact that we've been watching too many of these classy good movies that hold up. It's time we actually watch absolute shit on here.
To be fair, I do get my fix offline. I watched Chopping Mall last night on Pluto TV.
Oh,
So,
talk about the best kind of enjoyable crap.
oh, it was so good. So good.
I mean,
So,
the robot makes that one chick's head explode. It's just good stuff.
I can't imagine we'll be getting that. So this is at least it's like, the wild card. It's Mexican. Maybe we'll get a little extra outside of code sleaze. I don't know. Not holding out hope for that, but I guess we'll see. Because again, I've only seen the Mystery Science Theater version,
Uh huh.
right? Which,
God.
when you get that link, you have to cut through about half of the Mystery Science Theater because they had to pad it out with another short to begin with to
Uh
get a
huh.
full 2 hour episode out of it, of course.
Yeah.
So, with that, should we say bye for now until we watch the robot versus the Aztec mummy?
I, I guess we should. Until that time, this is Matt in Arizona and Matt in Buffalo, singing those reenlistment blues.
My hitch was up Monday, not a dog soldier no more. I ain't a soldier no more. They give him all that money, so much my pockets is sore. Oh, my pockets is sore. Yeah, right. More dough than I can use.